Hey everyone, it's Lynn from Holistic Health and Wellness. Welcome to another podcast episode. And today I'm thrilled to have with me Dr. Ashley. She is a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and she is a board certified acupuncturist and herbalist, and she works out of the Los Angeles area. So she received her doctorate in healthy aging and longevity, and who doesn't just love that? And she wrote her thesis on epigenetics, the study of how our genes are affected by our diet and lifestyle, such an interesting subject to me. So during her last 8 years as an acupuncturist, Dr. Ashley has performed over 40,000 treatments, and she practices virtually from Malibu, California. She specializes in healthy aging, epigenetics, hormone balancing, fertility, detoxification, headaches, and stress reduction. And she received her doctorate and graduate degree from Yosan University of Traditional Chinese Medicine, holds a degree in International Business and Marketing from the University of Texas. She has also attended Harvard Westlake High School in LA, and she practices homeopathy in Los Angeles and has attended world-renowned Dr. Luke DeShepper's Renaissance Institute of Classical Homeopathy. And she studied the healing properties of herbs, holistic nutrition, flower essences, essential oils, light color therapy, and whole foods for more than 20 years. So Dr. Ashley combines all of these elements to instill holistic lifestyle changes. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ashley. Thrilled to have you. So are you actually in LA?
Yes, I practice out of Malibu, and now I have worked completely, my whole practice is virtual now.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Wonderful. So are you affected at all by any of the fires?
The air quality in Los Angeles is not very good. Nothing compared to what's happening in Northern California, but of course, it definitely still has an effect here in Los Angeles.
Sure, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in and let's talk about the most important organ for detox in relation to hormone balances. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So as a Chinese medicine practitioner, we look at the body as a whole. And so when somebody has an issue with hormones or their cycle and things like that, we look to see which organ might be affected. So in Chinese medicine, one of the major ones that we really look at is the liver. So the liver is kind of all about the free flow of things. And so when people have PMS or their period is not regular and just sort of starting to change, things like that, we want to make sure that the liver is really supported. So the liver has to do a lot with breaking down hormones. And so especially for people who have difficult periods, again, when it starts to change and it's not quite as regular, we want to make sure that there are things that the person is not consuming or lifestyle factors that throw the liver off. So stress is really big, toxins in the environment, the things that we put on and in our body all have a really big effect. One thing that a lot of people don't really like to hear is how sugar affects their hormones and throws things off. And so again, when people are starting to have some different issues with their hormones, I always want to look at the foods they're eating and again, kind of clean up their lifestyle to bring the body burden down. And so the body burden is basically, if you think of your system as sort of like a bucket, it gets full with different sort of environmental, either toxins, stress, things like that. And then often the bucket sort of gets full. And then when it starts to overflow is when we have certain symptoms.
So that kind of goes along with the body burden effect on hormones then.
Yes.
How does it throw them out of whack?
How does it, I'm sorry, what?
Throw them out of balance.
Sure.
Out of whack.
So there are different things, even heavy metals, environmental toxins, they can affect the endocrine system. So the hormonal system is pretty delicate. And so when you have certain toxins or environmental exposures, this really affects the hormone system. And then you have different issues that might go on that would maybe affect the thyroid or the adrenals and even just the hormones. And so you basically are making it more difficult for your body to run efficiently and to basically keep things on track.
So tell us what epigenetics is. In your bio, we mentioned it a couple of times. So what exactly is that?
Yeah, so epigenetics is the study of how our lifestyle affects our genetic expression. So your genes are stable. And so basically that's like a code that you're given. And I talk about it, it's like a blueprint of sort of how your life and basically certain diseases might play out. So the thing that is more interesting to me is that we actually have a lot of control over those genes expressing or not. So for somebody who, lives a really clean lifestyle, minimizes sugar and things and certain diets that basically can optimize them, you really have a lot of control over if something's going to express or not. So even though people get stuck into this mentality of, oh, my parents have this, I'm going to have heart disease, or my grandfather had diabetes, my mom had type 2 diabetes, I'm definitely going to get that. So I really try to break those patterns in people's subconscious, because just because those things are there and as a possibility, that's all they are, is a possibility. You have a lot of control of making those changes. And a lot of times habits are passed down through families, but it's really our responsibility to become aware of those patterns and make those changes.
So can I give an example of that in
Sure.
what we experienced? So my husband's mother had triple bypass by the time she was in her 50s. And of course, back then it was so bad that it was a really huge major thing. And it was something that they told her they could never repeat. And then from then on, she had heart disease and had a lot of problems. So, my husband always had that concern with his heart. So he was very athletic. He ran every day, ate well. So probably 3 years ago now, he started having issues with his heart. And he actually had 3 or 4 procedures. They did them through the wrist rather than his thighs or his groin. And he had 2 stents put in. And he was so upset because he'd had to have these 2 stents and he felt like he'd taken care of himself all of his life. And I'm like, but your mother had triple bypass. If you hadn't have been that athletic, healthy person taking care of yourself, this could have been so much worse for you.
Right.
I mean, it was just 2 and they weren't even totally blocked. So, I totally believe that we do have control. So it doesn't always necessarily mean that you're not going to have something, but you can definitely make it a whole lot better.
Yes, that's true as well. Definitely. And that's the thing too, is because there's so many factors that go into, let's just say, heart disease, for example. And a lot of the education around that years ago, was centered around eating fat-free and things like that. And so a lot of people still had sugar. And we now know that sugar is extremely damaging to plaque and, causing a lot of issues with arteries and things like that. So it's also tricky because a lot of the information that we have in ways to mitigate certain symptoms and prevention of disease, it seems like it's always changing. So, people also forget that a lot of the things that are happening now have been in the works for the last 20, 30 years. So, I'm sure he was doing all these different things. And again, there's still the emotional component too. And then that imprint of him being concerned. So that was great that he actually kind of took control and had all these other mechanisms. But again, he probably had this underlying fear that it was going to happen. And so that's also something, right, to acknowledge and try to reprogram.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we forget that part of it. My son is forever saying to me, oh yeah, I got all of my bad genes from you or from dad. And I'm like, thanks. I mean, you could do something about it, but instead
Exactly.
eating
Yeah.
really badly and not taking care of himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times too, you know, people, like, again, when they're in their, let's say, 60s, it's really common that they then need some sort of triple, quadruple bypass, and they wonder all of a sudden where this came from. But like I said, it's been brewing for 30 years. And even if you've cleaned up your diet in the last 10, you still had maybe 20 years of being really hard on your body, or, you know, a lot of people really forget and discount how detrimental stress is. So a lot of men, especially, and women, you know, work really hard, have high stress jobs, things like that. And they do things to mitigate some of that by exercising and eating healthy. But there's still a whole other piece of that that's just the stress factor and what that does to their system.
Mm. So is the correlation in epigenetics, is there a correlation with our hormone balancing?
So yeah, well, basically there's an area of epigenetics that I look at with clients that shows how people process their hormones. So, you know, for a lot of women, especially, I mean, men too, but breaking down estrogens can be an issue. And that can be an issue that can turn into fibroids, cysts, endometriosis, and then hormone dependent cancers. So basically, some people just don't process the hormones as well, and they sort of recirculate the estrogens into a more dangerous type. And so that's one area that we look at, and then make some tweaks of things to take to help get rid of those excess estrogens. And there's things that are more food-based, like it's very important to eat the cruciferous vegetables, and generally, if you can, about a pound of vegetables a day helps pull things out of your system. And then on the other side too, there's some really good supplements that people can take, like calcium D-glucarate or DIM. Those are a few things that are just very concentrated to help you pull out excess estrogen. So for the people that don't process it well, it gets recirculated and then absorbed, and that's when it becomes more problematic. And another big issue that people overlook often is constipation. So for a lot of people, the estrogen gets stored and actually just reabsorbed back into the system. So constipation is really, really crucial for hormone balancing.
Oh, I did not know that. That's very interesting.
And again, it's that way for just getting toxins out of your system. You know, basically when things are stagnant and kind of not getting removed as they should, that's when some issues happen.
Right. And I had IBS myself until I learned how to eat healthy and change my lifestyle, and haven't had a problem since. So I know the importance of being able to handle that, and we can handle that through eating correctly and the healthy lifestyle and the stress relief.
Yeah, and hydration. People sometimes overlook just some of the basics, you know, like getting enough water, exercise and movement, and getting good sleep, and then in meditation or some sort of mindset. So, you know, a lot of us are so rightfully, you know, so, and it happens that, you know, lives are so busy, but again, and we want something quick and easy, but you really have to have some of those really solid foundational pieces in place for, you know, optimizing your health, but just feeling healthy in general.
So I'm going to ask you a question that we actually hadn't discussed before, but
no problem.
So tell me a little bit about the light color therapy. What exactly is it and how does it help?
Oh, sure. So in Chinese medicine, we have also colors that are basically attached to certain organs or emotions. So for example, in this instance, the liver, the color is green. So for people who have anxiety, it goes anywhere, sorry, from not anxiety, anger, depression, and resentment. But again, the hormones being unbalanced is often looked at to the liver is where we look. So when people have these issues, I have them visualize the color that's affected with the organ. So green, for example, and that really helps. But there are actually machines that are light color Yeah.
So we totally froze on that. So you were saying there were light color machines?
Ah, yes. Yeah, there are some light color machines or some like light color frequencies that can be implemented with different practitioners. I currently mostly focus on the patient or client visualizing the color and utilizing that in their everyday practice, maybe like in the morning or in the evening, or if they were receiving acupuncture, I would give them a guided visualization with a color.
So does acupuncture in any way help balance hormones?
Definitely, yes. So acupuncture is one of my favorite ways to help balance the hormones. It's really wonderful because it again addresses organs, or if there's some sort of blockage like in the actual area. So if someone has cysts, fibroids, or even just an irregular cycle, things like that, or prolonged bleeding, there are different points that we use and point prescriptions for all the different kind of like hormonal or gynecological issues. And they're really, really effective, especially when paired with herbal treatment and then with lifestyle.
Mm. So what kind of herbal therapies do you use?
So yeah, there are a lot of amazing Chinese herbs. I am pretty particular with some of the brands I use because I work so hard to detox people from chemicals and
Right.
contaminants. And there are a lot of Chinese companies that unfortunately the products just have heavy metals and they're not organic. So my whole thing is always having products that are as clean as possible. So I don't want to be giving someone an herbal formula filled with junk that I'm trying to get out of people's body.
Right.
So there are really amazing formulas. One that's commonly used is called Relaxed Wanderer. And that's a formula that is often used for people who are like, it's one of the biggest sort of like PMS formulas or people that get irritable before their cycle. It's for this concept of excess and deficiency. So you're very tired, yet you're like stressed. And so it's the number one formula that's actually prescribed in China because most people are stressed but actually deficient. So you have this combination of things going on.
Mm. So how does Chinese medicine view or treat hormone imbalances?
So yeah, so we look at different things that are happening. So there are whole different diagnoses that are used, but what we do is see, again, this concept of either excess or deficiency. And then it's really, really well known for helping people through perimenopause and menopause, because as people start to get hot flashes, we have this whole concept of your yin. So your yin is kind of like things that are like moist and supple. So like you need that for your joints to work well, but also your yin is sort of tied with your like femaleness, and basically it declines as we age. So there are a lot of herbs that we have to help with that decline. And then again, if there's some heat that occurs with either hot flashes or night sweats, we have herbs that help balance that and cool the person down. So it's a really nice option for people who don't want to use any sort of either synthetic or bioidentical hormones. And you can get a lot of relief. But the other thing that's really good is it's also really nice to help balance the situation when you're in that kind of perimenopause time frame where things are all over the place. So it's really lovely because Chinese medicine, because it's its own form of medicine and it's been used for up to about 5,000 years, they have formulas for everything. So it's really wonderful to be able to implement these things even into foods, and they make kind of like these soups and rice combination that you infuse herbs into. So a lot of people are able to have some of these teas and herbs and things like that on a day-to-day basis, and then herbal formulas too that are stronger.
And I'm assuming that there's always that word of precaution that people shouldn't just go out and think, oh, this is great, I'll try this. I mean, they need to be under a practitioner
Yes.
to know what to use and what not to use.
Definitely, because we have actually a lot of interactions with herbs and pharmaceuticals. So, if you think of an herbal formula as a medication, really, so I don't tell people, just to go pick something up off the shelf. These things should be more regulated pretty much, but people read the description, and they might order things, but you really should be speaking to and under the care of a licensed practitioner. And anyone that is an acupuncturist has gone pretty much through some lengthy schooling.
So do you have any way that people can find a health practitioner or a Chinese practitioner or even an acupuncturist in their own area? Is there a way to find one that is very reputable?
Let's see. So yeah, I'm in California, so we have actually a large amount of acupuncturists. But what I usually do is either if somebody wants somebody local to their area, most schools have an alumni network. So there are a handful of the better and more reputable schools in the country. And so what I would do is you could maybe look up the acupuncture schools and then ask for their referrals through their alumni directory. I often do that when I'm trying to find someone local for a client. But I would say there are varying levels of, how great the school is or not. And so there's some very well-known schools in the country. And those are generally, I'd say, the better places to contact. So, but usually what it is often everyone should be licensed. So, people aren't practicing without a license, things like that. Unless maybe you're frequenting like a local Chinatown or something like that. But most of them have licenses in China, but maybe they just don't hear. So it is important, I think, to do a little bit of, background check and things like that, because there are varying levels of how it might be a good fit for each individual. And even though there are a lot of acupuncturists that practice more on a general, kind of like a general practitioner level, like a doctor, but then there are people who have very specific specialties. So if you have something that you're really looking to focus on, it is really good to just make sure that acupuncturist, that's one of their specialties.
So how have you handled the COVID crisis with your acupuncture practice?
Yep. So I mostly practice. So like I said, I'm virtual now. So I focus a lot more on the genetics, and then I use Chinese theory with my clients that are in these sort of 6 to 12 month programs for targeted detox. So on the 6-month program side, that's more where I focus on hormone balancing. And then more 12 months is when somebody has a lot of layers of things, or if they have more chronic conditions that they've had for multiple years, and we kind of need more time to regulate their system. Yes, so, but yeah, I don't practice acupuncture too much anymore. There are a lot of people that are on pause right now, but again, there's still quite a bit of people that are practicing. So it is available still.
Good. So how do people find you?
So I have a website. It's drashley.com, and that's drashley.com. And I'm available on Instagram and Facebook as Dr. Ashley Beckman.
And I will put all the links in there. And I had noticed, I'd been on your website today, that you have a free healthy snacks?
Oh, yes, immune boosting snacks. And then I also offer a complimentary 30-minute call just to see, if someone wants to talk to me to see if it's a good fit for what they need.
Great. So I'll direct everybody to all of those sites so that they can get hold of you. And do you have any closing words, any kind of thoughts or tips that you'd like to pass on?
The main thing I would say is, that again, and we touched on this, is that you do have quite bit of control over what happens with your health. And it is important to be an advocate for yourself and your family members, usually too. So, just make sure that you're doing things every day that are more health giving and nourishing, as opposed to things that can make it so that you're not optimized or you're not flourishing. So basically, we have so much control over what goes in and on our body. And so I want to make sure that people, take that control back. And there's a lot of things out there in our world that unfortunately are more disease promoting. And so it's up to us to kind of do some research, or at least seek out people who know these things and that are experts in the field, and just really make great choices.
Yeah, it's really easy to go check out Dr. Google.
Yeah.
And you don't always get the most accurate and expert advice and information there. So I really agree with you to find somebody who's an expert in the field and get some good, solid information.
Yeah, and that's my other thing that's very important, is that, things really need to be customized and individualized, because just something that will work for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so that's always my kind of like biggest point with people, is that's why you need to speak with someone that's a professional that knows your whole history, because everything is connected. And so that's, again, why I love the genetic piece, is because I can look at that and kind of have a good blueprint of what you came in with. And then I pair it with labs that are happening right now in functional medicine labs to see like what's actually manifesting right now in your system, and then with what you came in with, and how we can really optimize and get you on the best path to feeling better.
Yeah, awesome. I think people underestimate the power of how a healthy lifestyle affects every area of our lives. Sugar is a huge one, as you said,
Yeah.
and having been a sugarholic all of my life, I totally get what you're saying about that. Until 10 years ago, when I was enlightened, I mean, I just abused my body with sugar and processed foods, and we just don't really realize what effect it has on us until we do get that actual knowledge of what it does to us.
Yeah, and people don't, they assume that if something is made, it's safe or healthy, and they really don't realize how much is not good for you, and then how much is just hidden, so.
Right. So we have the responsibility, once we've been made aware, to go down that right path. So I really appreciate you being with us today, Dr. Ashley. I find Chinese medicine is just fascinating, and more and more we see people who are leaning towards something like that. So I'm really happy to have had you on here and share a little.
Thank you. I always love chatting about Chinese medicine and genetics and food. It's, it's really important. And like I said, people can make these choices that really help or hinder the process, for sure.
Awesome. So I really thank you today. I'm sure our audience thanks you, and I look forward to maybe doing something again with you in the future.
Yes, of course. I'd love to.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.